Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. This is the gospel of the famous Temptation Sunday, one of the great Sundays in our Lenten observance. And now we read it again, and we read it because after the resurrection and ascension of the Lord Jesus Christ into heaven, it became our duty to keep the church going. So instead of the Lord, who is now going to suffer for the maintenance of the church, it is now up to us. And the first thing that he talks about is your material existence. In your material existence, it's symbolized by food, but it's not food. It's the people who feel as though they're not making enough money. Some people never have enough money and they never tithe. They never tithe. It's 10%. It's 10 cents out of every dollar that the Lord is asking for. Right? And people don't tithe because I don't have enough. In other words, if I had this amount of money right here, I'd be okay and I could tithe. Well, what happens is when you get to that amount of money, oh my God, inflation has now made this amount of money, I will never have enough money. And so people never tithe, and the Lord is saying, it does not matter if we're only talking about the bread that comes to your mouth. You are to give 10% of what you do, who you are, all of your experience and your education, the whole of your material existence. Right? My strength, if I have any strength, everything that I possess, to give a tenth and offer a tenth to the Lord. You may, in fact, offer more if you wish. But a tenth is the minimum legal amount so that you, when you stand before Him, will be justified, having been not guilty, but having been acquitted as righteous for the gifts that you've been given. Because your strength and your intellect and all of your prosperity is due to God. And whether God has given you little or God has given you much, it's 10%. And of course, the strange thing is that the poor people tend to give their 10% more. Because they see in themselves and in their life the fragility that a man who has money doesn't see. When you have money, you tend to think, well, I can hire a lawyer to get me out of a legal bind. I can hire doctors to get me out of a physical bind. I can get all kinds of representatives because I can pay for them. And whatever expertise I lack in the world, I can simply pay for and get. Well, the Lord is saying no matter how full or how empty the cup is, or how large the cup is, out of which you drink, He's asking whether He may share. And He wishes to share in 10%. All right. Then the devil said to him, because there are some people who are unconcerned, completely unconcerned about money. And so you have another group, and they're concerned about power. I remember one time reading in Life magazine. This was when Life hadn't ceased its publication. It ceased publication somewhere in the 60s. Then it started up again. But Life magazine went down to Castro's Cuba, and he found the author of the article and the photographer that was sent. They watched the Cuban ballet. Now, nobody has ever heard of the Cuban ballet, but Cuba at the time had a very close relationship to Russia, and Russia was sending some of its greatest teachers from the Bolshoi to go to Cuba. And these Cubans are a mix. They're a mix of native people and Africans. So the ones that were chosen for ballet were strong and long-legged, and they had beautiful, incredible bodies, and now they had this teaching. And they danced in a way that would shame ballet companies throughout Europe. But the women who danced, they had holes in their stockings. They had holes in their stockings. Did anybody ever send you out of the house with big holes in your stockings? Fidel Castro would rather have power, and now his brother Raul would rather have power than money. And there are people who are like that. So with these kinds of people, you cannot impress them by saying, I'll give you this and I'll give you that, turn to me. No. He's driven, and even then, not by ideology, although he was cloaked in an idea. He wore this as his mantle of protection, the way in which he wore his army fatigues when he gave speeches. But it was a lie. He was driven by personal power. The power to be numero uno. And there are a lot of people that do that. A lot of people. And the last thing that was questioned with the Lord was his own relationship with God. Now, because Jesus was and is who he is, there are prophecies about him, he being the Son of Man, the Son of God, and God. And we don't have these general prophecies in the Bible about us. They are not specific. But we identify vicariously with the characters in the Bible, and we say as we read, that is me. I am the one who sinned. I am the one who was redeemed. I was the one who was cleansed by the blood of the Lamb. The sacrifice on the cross was for me. And now I must go forth as the 70 apostles and the 12 disciples. And I must do for the church in imitation those things that they themselves did who were precursors, my forerunners, my forebears, my ancestors. I must follow them in everything. They showed me the path. I don't have to blaze a new trail. I have to do what they have done. So I do so with my witness. I tithe. I do not seek to become powerful, but I embrace humility. And lastly, I trust in God, because these are the antidotes for the attacks of the devil. You know the stories of people during the financial collapse because of the way in which lousy paper was used to support loans. And it all came as an implosion and brought huge loss to so many people. There were people who felt so impoverished, even though they had much, much more money than we will have ever. They couldn't live under those circumstances. And some, in their despondency, took their own lives. Well, that's how the devil wins, isn't it? You're poor, you have nothing. The guy was a billionaire. A billionaire. But he was poor and he had nothing. You know, Ted Turner, he was called the Mouth of the South. He was the one that started the peace and freedom games with Russia. He gave $1 billion to the United Nations. He almost bought CBS or NBC. So wealthy and so powerful. Now he feels forlorn and kicked out. He was actually kicked out of his own company that he started. Can you imagine that? And he feels really miserable. He owns more land in New Mexico than the government. And he only has $1 billion or so left to his name. And he's written a book about it. And he's sad. Well, Ted, come live in my house for a while. The experience will do you some good. Do you see what I'm saying to you? It's not about what you have, it's about what you're leaning on. I'm not poor, I'm rich. I tell people all the time, I have more than I ever thought I would have. And they look at you and say, boy, you sure didn't think you'd ever have much. What you don't have a very big ego? You don't think you have very much intelligence? You don't think that your education was marketable? No, it was because I was never willing to trade my free time for something. I didn't want the thing so badly enough that I would enslave myself in some work to purchase this thing. Because the thing didn't enlarge me as much as the freedom and the use of my own discretionary time led me to enjoy life. So that's why I personally didn't do it. So when I look around and I find that, hey, I've got a house, and it's livable, and it can be any temperature I want, and my refrigerator is filled with food, and my bed is comfortable, and I've got a flat screen TV, I'm good to go. Well, you don't have to be very ambitious in order to get all that stuff. But there are some people who are just not satisfied. They just are not satisfied. I don't know what to do for those people or to say to those people. Because the Lord, who is the ruler of all, came and took our form and said, I don't even have a home. I have no place to lay my head. The Son of Man had no kitchen. He had nothing except the generosity and the kindness of strangers. And he came from place to place to place, and as the disciples were going out, he was sitting, and it was at the 12th hour when he was talking to the Samaritan woman, Fotini. The 12th hour, it means hadn't eaten. It means there's no breakfast. And when his disciple came back and saw him talking to the woman, he said, did anybody give him anything to eat? Because he's got to be tired. Where does this energy come from? You know, they were all hungry too. And they were looking for something to eat. Try not eating. You who go to work and then say, oh boy, it's hard. You know, I have to go to work. I can't fast till 12 or 3. I can't do that. Well, the Lord who made all food, who made every bit of food that we eat, he didn't eat. The Lord who made habitations for all of the animals didn't have a house. So, in the last thing where the devil tries to conquer us is your relationship to God. You're worthless. God doesn't look at you. You're ugly. You're dumb. You are unimportant. No. There is no one that was made that way. When the Lord looks at you, he looks at you with the smiling face of the mother towards her new infant. The Lord looks at you when you get old. Nobody looks particularly good when they get old, but when you get really old, he still looks at you in the way that he looks at the baby's face. Without a wrinkle, the skin is soft and perfect, sparkling eyes, looking up in trust. That's the way the Lord looks at you. He looks at you in this perfect way, seeing you through the eyes of love. And have faith in that, because he is your Father. So we're on the other side. I told this story to the deacons one time. When I was ordained a priest, I went back to the cell in Anba Bishoy Monastery, and I was so nervous, my heart was beating, and I hadn't slept in about 30 hours, and I was trying to calm myself down, so I opened up the Bible to read a passage that always gave me comfort. And as I read the passage, I started to panic, and my heart inside me started to beat even faster. And it was because the passage that I was reading I didn't understand. And I said, how can I not understand this passage? I have read this passage, I have it almost memorized. How come I now can't understand the passage? It was because before I was one of the sheep that was being shepherded. Now I am the shepherd. Now I am the priest. And now the whole gospel changes for me. Well, the reason that we hear about the things that were in the Bible today is now they are not about Jesus, but with the apostolic emphasis that we give this time of year, we now realize it's for us. It's not about Jesus who hungered and thirsted on the mountain and who was tempted by the devil for 40 days. It's now about us. And what is your 40 days? Is sickness physically? Is it emotional problems? Is it financial problems? Is it distrust or betrayal? What are your 40 days? And 40 is just a symbol. It may be 40 years. So the point is, how do you live this temptation that the devil is bringing you? You live in it exactly the way that Christ lived in it. And if you not do what my did, then you say, the apostles did. Well, too big for me. Then I'll live in it the way in which I myself through the Bible. And if you read the Bible and you are honest, one of the people in the Bible you will identify. Their path to salvation, will find that certainly of your own. It's just like the Lord gave us many flowers, and the flowers are all different. An orchid does not look anything like a lily does not look anything like a rose does not look anything like a tulip. But they are all beautiful, and they all have their own value. So I suggest to you that in this gospel that we have prayed, you find a place for yourself. And you gain what St. Cyril of Alexandria calls as a manliness. That means striving in a warrior, with a warrior-like spirit towards victory. As people go marching off to war, they go off in unison. That means stepping to a beat, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, marching with purpose in a direction and in their will. So please gather yourselves, gather your strength, and commit yourselves. The temptation will come, but the Lord has shown you the way past the temptation. Trust in Him, and you will certainly be saved. Glory be to His holy name, both now and ever, and unto the age of all ages. Amen.